A very good morning to you all, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you're all good, and my speakers are causing interference. Obviously, you've seen the title of this video. We're going to be talking a little bit about some of the decisions that Niantic have decided to try and implement in the middle of July. Perhaps while it was still very fresh in my mind, and perhaps while I was also driving, maybe not the best time to try and come up with a sensible argument, but it was quite raw, so that was from the heart. I now want to let the head rule this video, essentially. My plan is I want to look through the actual article itself, we'll read through it, and then I want to talk a little bit about some of the points of why what they're choosing to remove is going to have a negative impact on a huge diversity of players and play styles. And I also want to showcase one game that Niantic is kind of in direct competition with in terms of the AR mobile gaming space and how they deal with this factor of the game. So let's jump into it. Now, I won't go through the entire article, but you know the basic drill with this. Exploration bonus updates coming to Pokemon Go. Yes, we've been in a pandemic now for 15 months. Jesus. Long time. And I have to say, this article is very, very clear. On one point, Niantic have communicated extremely clearly, perhaps too clearly in this case, haha, what they're intending to do. So that's actually a plus point. New exploration bonuses, new things need to be added to the game. Every game in any console, mobile gaming outfit needs to move forward to survive, so this is a good thing. Bonuses introduced last year that we plan to remove or change. Now, it does say that it's going to be tested in the US and New Zealand first. The first problem I feel with something like that is that I understand they have to choose, if they want to test a rollout feature, choosing specific areas. Now, usually back in the day, it was Australia who got lumped with the revamped coin system that everybody thankfully got reverted, because if they'd implemented that, it would have been ridiculous. If these changes do go ahead, I hope that the two player bases in those regions make your voices heard. Please show Niantic that this is not okay. The other thing I feel is that US, New Zealand is two different corners of the globe, but if you choose two different points, you miss the rest of the shape or the journey there between the 2 points. I don't think it's the best implementation of this feature, I have to say. Finally, bonuses last year that we are planning on keeping. Now, obviously, I think they announced this a little while ago that some changes that were made to the pandemic style of gameplay would not be reverted, and we'll look into those, and some of them are quite frankly blindingly obvious. The new bonuses, now these are really good. I will have a tinge of negativity with some of these, is the fact that it's taken this long to implement them into the game. Receiving 2 raid passes per day while spinning gym photo stops. That's brilliant, twice as many free in-person raids. But 2 things, we as the player base have been asking for that for about 4 years, and it's only just coming into the game, so that's Niantic dragging their heels seriously on that one. The other thing is that those are in-person raids. Now, there are, as I said, huge communities. So the South America community is massive. They won't be able to take advantage, really, of that perk of the game coming in. I think it's trainer Gameford. Is it Gameford on Twitter who keeps posting saying, can we convert, if you get a free or a premium normal pass, can you convert it to a remote pass if you can't visit a gym in reality? Which I think, if they implemented that with the 2 free passes here, that would be brilliant, because then players who are still in a bad situation with the pandemic could utilise this bonus, convert them to remote raid passes, and then do their 2 free raids per day that way. Benefit from increased incense while moving. Now, incense back in the day, I'm sure anybody who played pre-pandemic Pokemon Go will be aware that incense was a completely useless item. It was piss poor. In order to gain what we have now in terms of a spawn every 60 seconds, you had to be moving, I think it was like 200 meters per minute or something like that. I feel you had to be walking insanely fast. You were almost better to jump on a bicycle, ride around, and that would be the only way you could massively utilise the effectiveness of incense back in the day. Since the pandemic, it's a case of it's been a spawn every 60 minutes no matter what. This obviously ties into what they're removing in the game, but I think that increased effectiveness of incense while moving around, yes, that's actually okay, because if it was paired with a better solution for what they're removing, that would increase playability and the incentive to go out and utilise an incense. If they revert the incense back to what it once was, I feel like people won't buy it as much Niantic. Be guaranteed gifts when spinning Pokestops, so long as they have not reached the maximum in their gift inventory. That one is just common sense, to be honest. That I don't see why I don't see why that has to be in the notes, to be honest. I know that they're being incredibly transparent, that's a good thing, but common sense would dictate that realistically, it's a bit like eggs. If you have egg space free and you spin a stop, you get an egg, but guaranteed gifts, if you have space in your gift inventory from spinning stops. It's kind of logical, isn't it? This next one is pretty cool. Receive 10 times a bonus XP from spinning a stop for the first time. So anybody remember the Adventure Week events, where they'd had like rock type Pokemon and stuff? What happened there is you would get something like 4 times the amount of XP for spinning a new Pokéstop with the halo around it. And that was to increase people going out to new areas, exploring new places and stuff like that. And it was really, really good because visit a new area in a big city, it was XP galore, really. So that is genuinely, that's a huge, huge boost. I think that's brilliant. That's it in itself. If you have the capability to move around freely and visit new places, new areas and stuff, that's going to make you want to do it if you are an XP grinder. It does say that these bonuses will end when the season of Discovery wraps up on September the 1st. Now, I'm assuming what that means is that they'll sort of rotate and change what you get a little bit. I hope they keep everything kind of as a base. They don't change things too dramatically because that would not look good on them. We're going to come back to the removing section because there's a huge amount that we need to discuss on that. What they are planning on keeping is a better thing. Incense duration will remain at 60 minutes. That's great. That really should be kind of bog standard because a 30-minute incense with what they're planning to remove would be a complete waste of time and nobody would get it. Walking requirement for Go Battle League. I think, honestly, if they put that back to how it was, people of the GBL community would probably just quit the game because GBL at the moment is already horrifically unplayable. Imagine if you had to walk, I think it was 2 or 3 kilometers to access your battles for the day. I think people would just put PvP down. So that's kind of a logical thing. You can challenge any trainer remotely with a QR code, and the requirement to battle with friends remotely has been lowered to good friends. I kind of forgot that was even in the game, I have to say. I don't know why, it's just sort of, it's not been something on my radar, but that's good. If you want to battle with friends, you'd know you won't have to be in person, and you won't have to be, I think it was Ultra Friends was the unlock for that, so that's really good. Which is what I mentioned yesterday, the maximum number of gifts you can carry in your bag at one time will remain at 20. And the next point, trainers will be able to open up to 30 gifts per day from the previous 20. I feel like this is like the bare minimum they can do, genuinely the bare minimum they can do, because it's good that it's keeping it in. Imagine if they reverted it with 400 friends. That would have just been stupid. But the very fact that we have 400 friends on the friends list now means that really I feel like we should be able to open 60 gifts per day. You can't get through opening gifts as effectively. It's just not possible because you want to have a mix of trying to go lucky friends with your best friends and you want to level up with everybody else. And if you've got 30 gifts to do that over 400 friends, that's kind of tricky to manage. The final point, which I think is a really nice little touch, you will continue to receive 3 times the Stardust and XP for your first Pokemon catch of the day, which I think is great. They shouldn't remove that, and they're not removing it, which I think is a really, really good thing. This is where I need to now have a bit more of a logical head and not get so heated, because I'm incredibly passionate about this game. I think this game is a really, really good thing. It's got so much capability. It does feel like 90% of the time it's wearing lead boots. It's not moving forward as well as it possibly could. I do care about this game. I care about the community of people around it, and when they do something stupid, it's kind of like, what are you doing? I also appreciate this video might be really long. These are what they're planning to remove, and we'll go through the points, and then I'm going to look through what I've said, why they shouldn't be removed, why they should stay as a permanent addition to the game. First off is the Incense. Over the past year, Incense effectiveness was increased to attract Pokemon to you more frequently, even if you weren't able to leave the house. After this change, this effectiveness will be set to the standard level when you are stationary, and increased effectiveness will kick in when you are moving. I know that a lot of people aren't totally fussed with that removal, but I personally am quite fussed because I think, don't forget, the standard level for an Incense is 1 Pokemon spawning every 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes of your life with an Incense running, 1 Pokemon. That is a huge, huge reduction. And I don't think it should be like that. I think they should work around a happy medium ground, because yes, you want to utilise Incense to make it more fun to go out and play, but I don't know, like for example, on Fridays, or Saturdays, I have to sit down, not have to, but I choose to sit down and I have to edit the podcast. And that can take anywhere between 6 to 12 hours, depending on how long the episode is, how much needs to be cut, etc. So I end up sitting down for a huge chunk of time. And what I've been doing in the past is I've been able to put on an Incense because you know that Pokemon are going to come regularly. And you can just catch while you're working. It was really, really useful to play from home. They're taking that away now, and I feel like the only thing that they're going to notice with that is that people are not going to buy Incense as much. The usability of Incense from home, it doesn't have to go back to one spawn every 5 minutes. What you could do, Niantic, is have it reduced so that it's like a 50% or a 1 in 3 times as useful as if you were walking around. So have a Pokemon spawn off your Incense every 2 to 3 minutes. Much like a lure, the normal lure spawns a Pokemon every 3 minutes. Well, why not have an Incense that's stationary match that rate? Because a lure is stationary, so the Pokéstop, it can't move. So an Incense, I think, should spawn a Pokemon every 2 to 3 minutes. That would be acceptable, particularly considering the Incense is now 60 minutes, so that would mean you would get a roughly around 30 Pokemon off that Incense, which, if you're sat still, isn't too bad, and you'll notice immediately when you go outside and utilise an Incense, okay, I can get 60 Pokemon, so that's double effectiveness. That's really good. That would be much better, Niantic, and that's my honest feedback. Critical, constructive feedback for once. Haha. Point number 2, ladies and gentlemen. Previously, your buddy Pokemon brought you more gifts each day, up to 5 gifts at once and up to 3 times a day. This is because we knew trainers were running low on supplies with Pokeballs and berries to help catch Pokemon. As we move to encouraging trainers to play outside more, they can continue to receive supplies from spinning Pokestops. After the change, the frequency of these gifts from buddy Pokemon will be reduced. Not necessary. I don't think any player on this planet of the Pokemon GO community would say, pandemic's over, right? Imagine that, I don't know, 2022, 2023, whenever the entire world is back to normal. I don't think there's going to be a single player who's going to say, right, I won't leave my house today because I know that my buddy Pokemon is going to bring me 30 Pokeballs and 15 berries. It wasn't actually as good as that. They're making it out like your buddy brought you, 600 Pokeballs or something. The supplies that the buddy Pokemon brought you were actually really poor. It wasn't actually a very effective feature. For example, if you couldn't leave the house and you were in self-isolation, you got enough resources to maybe catch a couple of Pokemon off Incense. But now they're removing the Incense thing anyway, so it ties in nicely with that. There is no reason for this whatsoever. In fact, I would say that the reason they should keep it as it is currently are the following. If you're a rural player and you have no Pokestops, but you want to run an Incense and move around and take use of the new super effective walking about Incense, you need your buddy Pokemon to bring you the odd Pokeball and bits and pieces and bring you some gifts, etc. It's damaging the rural player community, I feel, again. If a player can't, for whatever reason, one day can't go out and access a Pokestop, not only are they going to miss their Pokestop daily streak, but they're also going to miss out on getting some items and things like that. What's wrong with having this as kind of a backup for items, like very few items and things like that? The way that they're wording it there is, like I said, they're making it sound way better a feature than it actually was, and if they're going to reduce it even further, it's going to be basically to the point where it's completely pointless. It'd be a bit like having a cat flap in an elephant house. A waste of time. That should stay. Really do feel that, because if you go out and about and you're spinning Pokestops and you're getting your gifts from your Pokestops and you're getting your Pokeballs from your Pokestops, your buddy Pokemon won't bring you the items because you're capped out already. Like for me personally, I've lived on a huge number of Pokestops. Very rarely do I actually have my buddy Pokemon bring me gifts anyway, because I'm always capped out. But that's not the case for most players who don't live on a stop, rural, who don't have access to stops every day. Why remove the feature? It's removing capabilities for quite a lot of the player base. Finally, this is the point that's caused the most controversy, frankly. Previously, Pokestop and gym interaction distances were increased to enable people to engage from a further distance or further away. After this change, the distance will revert back to the standard distance when it makes sense in different places, though may be increased during future events and as part of certain features. Now, having watched a lot of content creators and a lot of people on Twitter and things like that have really vocalised how displeasing this news is. If I showed you my notes, there's like 2 or 3 lines for each of the other 2 points, and then the Pokéstop gym interaction distance has about 15. So a big thank you to a couple of people in the comments of the previous video who have listed a few reasons why this would seriously impact them and in their play game style, and how it's negatively going to impact how they play. Big thank you for sharing your input, genuinely. This is what we need, is the community. The community's coming together to say, Niantic, don't do that. There is a petition going around, and when I signed it, it had 4,000 signatures yesterday. Now it's nearly at 50,000 signatures. It will be linked in the description. I highly recommend that you go and sign up to it if you haven't done already, because it's one format in which we can communicate to Niantic that we don't want this change implemented. The increased distance for the stops and gyms helped in so many aspects of the game, not just the fact that you could socially distance, which honestly I don't think social distancing will go away for a long time. I think social distancing will be here for like a year and a half, 2 years after now. Genuinely, it will be here for a long time. It helped access stops previously unavailable due to GPS issues, due to trespass issues, due to unable to be accessed places that were like, you know, locked behind, I don't know, private gates and bits and pieces. Another factor is that you can avoid people at raids. You don't have to be all in one big bunch, and that was actually a really big problem, which I'm going to feed into later with EX raids. EX raids, when huge numbers of people joined for one raid and then, you know, caused chaos at certain locations and things like that, like crowding. If you have anxiety, if you want to socially distance, if you want to avoid unwanted conflict, if you want to avoid certain people, maybe who play in your local area who you don't like, or if it's a personal safety kind of issue, the double stop and gym radius allowed you to play at a distance from a location that made it more comfortable for every player, depending on what they were. Like, I'm very comfortable personally with going up to people and chatting with people, but that's not the case for everybody. Some people want to partake in a raid but don't want to talk to people, and that they should be entitled to do that without having to be forced into a small area. Removing it, Niantic, is going to impact a lot of people. This is a point that I don't think I've seen anybody else make, and Niantic, I think this one might speak quite nicely to you. You will lose money. I know that's going to be a shock horror factor for you, Niantic, but you will lose some money, and this is why. Because, for example, if somebody now has access to a stop from home, work, a cafe, a restaurant, pub, somewhere they're sitting doing something else, they're having a family meal or whatever, or if you're having a meal with your friends after Com Day, the double stop radius meant that you could access maybe a stop that once the reduction comes back into place and it goes back to normal, you can't access. If you're sat down for a long time, I know I do this and a lot of my friends do this, if you're sat in one location for a long time, you put a lure on, people will buy more lures. People have bought more lures, and because you can access a stop, you will do it. By reducing the distance and no longer being able to allow people to access stops more easily, people won't buy lures, Niantic. People won't spend their Pokecoins on a lure that they otherwise would have done in the last 15 months. That's one point that might hit home quite hard, as they'll go, oh my god, Pokecoins? We won't get more people buying Pokecoins? Oh, This is the point I saw the Trainer Club make, and Zoe Tudos, I think, in her video. Not having to walk out of your way just to access a Pokéstop or a gym. And the good case in point, and combating GPS drift issues. I have GPS drift issues here in my flat because I'm in a basement flat. I'm speaking from a very privileged kind of, I live on 3 stops now, technically 7 with the increased radius due to whatever, so I might be a bit biased on this, and you can hound me in the comments later. GPS drift issues. I have had circumstances where my GPS has drifted me away from all of my stops, backwards that way, where there's no stops. I'm like, I'm still here, and I was luring up, and now I can't access the stops. It kind of ties in with what I was saying about if you're sat down in a pub, in a restaurant, you know, sat down in a certain area in a cafe or whatever. If you want to access a Pokéstop or a gym or jump into a raid using a premium pass or a free pass, because of the increased radius, you can do that more easily, sat from a location where you don't have to get up and specifically walk to that gym. This is the thing, we're not talking about, oh, that gym is, 200 meters away. It's a matter of 20 meters, and it's maybe a case of, I'm sat down having a coffee or having some food with a bunch of friends or family, and I want to partake in that raid because the local group is doing something, we're all coordinating it. Rather than me having to anti-socially get them and sorry, I'll be 5 minutes and walk 20 metres across the road to go to a gym, I can raid it while I'm here having a coffee or a pint and not leave. Maybe it's weather outside, maybe it's raining and you want to stay inside and enjoy your meal. That allows people to do more with the game, and by taking it away you will stop the usability of that feature. One key thing is that I know that Niantic and Pokemon GO is probably the best AR game for this function, is that the real world locations of Pokestops and gyms are very informative. They're very, very informative as to what they are in the real world. You get a disc image, and sometimes, depending on how well people submit them, you get a description of what that place is, which is great. It's very, very informative and very, very educational. I think the Niantic are worried that if we keep the radius as it is, people won't go to the location specifically to look at whatever it is. The counter argument to this is that the importance of the location should be kind of subjective to whoever's playing the game, Niantic. For example, I might want to raid at a football ground, but I don't want to go and stand and have to stand like right next to the football ground because maybe there's a match on, there's huge queues of people, there's people shouting, and I'm not a fan of football if you weren't obvious, but but maybe they're all having like a jolly, having some drinks and stuff. I don't want to have to go and stand in the middle of the crowd with my phone tapping for a raid. I would quite like to stand a certain distance back and access the gym that way. If I spin a Pokéstop from the increased gym radius and I see, oh, that image is really interesting, I wonder what that is, where is it? I will make the conscious decision myself to go and visit that location. I don't need you, Niantic, to dictate me to have to go to the location. I kind of already mentioned this, but if it's crap weather, the weather's rubbish outside, it's raining, and you want to find some shelter to do a raid. If I load up the game, that gym, which is right at the top there, the one that's sort of barely in the distance, right underneath where my clock for the phone is. Oh, Snorlax. Damn it. That gym has no shelter, no cover whatsoever, but with the increased radius, you can find some shelter under trees, bus stops, etc. You can access the gym from a further safer distance without having to brave whatever, snow, rain, wind, etc. It's a much easier access. Also, if it's a church, you don't all have to stand around the church doing a raid and interrupting somebody's, I don't know, ceremony. Having the increased gym radius meant that you don't have to force your gameplay, your raiding community into non-Pokemon GO player lives. Another factor is that Valor gym there, which I believe, that has the tier 5 egg on it. That is in the middle of the shopping centre. With the increased radius, we could access that gym from outside the shopping centre. We could stand on the pathway that goes around the back of the shopping centre and access the raid from there. If we want to raid it in person, we can stand a safe enough distance, not have to have a group of us go into the shopping centre and cause unnecessary crowding just because we want to stand there tapping on a Regigigas shiny raid. The other thing is that I can actually then film doing the raid and I don't get kicked out of the shopping centre again, but that's just me. This is something that Zoe2Dots brought up, which I watched a video yesterday evening, and it's a very good point, and I feel like this is just logic, this is just common sense, and I don't see why Niantic aren't seeing this point, or I don't know who in Niantic isn't seeing this point, but the fact that we have a double radius for Pokestops and gyms will not mean that people won't gonna go outside. People will want to go outside and play. Like, people have massively shifted now to wanting to play outside. Like the Gibble Comday and Swablu Comday, Ian and Coops respectively, came down to my area, travelled, we played outside. Every com day we played outside. Literally, that gym stop radius thing has not impacted the want to go and play outside with friends and visit places as much as Niantic seem to believe it is. It's kind of mad. It just means that you don't have to divert where you're walking. Maybe you are walking for a rare spawn. You've got on the tracker, it says, hey, this Snorlax is at this stop. Well, maybe you want to spin. You want to spin a stop that's over there, but your Snorlax stop is over there in the distance. You can walk in a straight line with a double radius. You can access that stop and get some gifts for sending to people. You don't have to walk in a two-side of a triangle. You can walk in one side of a triangle and access a stop already. In that case, the double stop radius just made it way easier. It just made it way, way easier to actually access stops and play more freely. You could play more freely as you wanted. This is a point which I believe is very, very real. With the player from home bonuses, they opened up the game to people with mobility issues and disabilities way, way more than it had done in the last 3 years prior to 2020. It was a much more disability-friendly version of the game, and taking these functions away is quite a serious thing, because it means that people who can't move around as easily as an able-bodied person could actually utilise these features very, very well. Whereas if taking them out, it means that it's going to take them a lot longer. It's going to make them probably more aggravated and irritated with the game, because you're going to have to travel that much further to get to a Pokéstop and a gym. If you're not able-bodied, that's a huge amount of more stress and effort than it otherwise has been. If anything, this reduction of the gym spin radius will mean that disabled people, it just won't be worth their time and effort. And I think they'll notice that there will be a drop-off. If they implement this feature, there will be a drop-off of people who otherwise were playing the game from home, etc. Why take that feature and function away? Just 2 more points. I know we've been rabbiting on for ages, but I think that Niantic have got their knickers in a twist with this, because if you make the game better to play from home, it makes it extortionately better to play outside. We've noticed that with community days. Previously, community days, 3-hour window, only the lures worked, nobody really used Incense because it was pointless, the spawns weren't as boosted. The latest com day, Gibble, I saw 2,100 plus Gibble. I caught 86 shiny Gibble. Huge amount of improvement to the com day. And that's because that had everything. They had boosted Incense, 6 hours. You don't even have to think about walking to gyms and stops, because you can just put, if you've got a Go Plus, you spin stops automatically, it will do them all really easily with the boosted radius. The play from home bonuses made going out and playing the game even better. They want to remove the play from home function, so bringing that back means that I feel that they'll remove some of the playability of going outside, because it won't correlate, if that makes sense in some way. This is the final point, really, I feel, for this thing, is that depending on how far away you are from the equator, the radius of your gym and spin circle that projects out from your avatar varies already with how effective it is. Here in London, because we're actually quite far away from the equator, you could actually still access stops that were about a metre or so away outside of the original radius, like your little ring that appears around your avatar. We could still access stops that were just outside of that. But the converse is true, is that when I went to Tenerife, even if you were slightly inside of that radius, the circle, and the stop was just inside the circle, it still didn't count. You had to walk even closer. The closer to the equator you are, the less effective that circle is. So reducing it again to what it once was is going to impact people differently depending on where they live. We're going to load up Jurassic World Alive. This game deals very differently with what you can access and how you access it depending on how close you are compared to Pokemon Go. We're going to completely ignore the multitude of creatures and stuff. Like this game is actually really fun and interesting. But you will note 2 things. Where I'm stood, there are no stops. So this is the complete opposite to Pokemon Go. You will note also the circle is a similar-ish distance away from your player avatar. In this case, it's just a dot with like a beacon projecting out. That's how close you have to be to stops to interact fully with them. But if I'm to click on this one here, I can still spin it from a further distance away, but it says collect now or walk closer to increase your rewards. And if I spin it, I can spin it from a distance, but the rewards I get are reduced. And the same, look, you can see there's a big blue circle that dots around that actually expands well beyond Ealing Green, and I can go right up to Walpole Park and spin this. These are reduced rewards, only 47 coins, which is frankly nothing in this game. That's pathetic. But for example, if you are at home, you're working, you're doing whatever, you're unable to go out at that specific moment, you can still get items, you can still get currency, you can still get whatever, but it's reduced because of how far away it is. Now, unfortunately, I can't really demonstrate because I would have to leave the house, and I can't bother to leave the house for this. Hopefully I can drift to something. If I'm to spin a stop within the little blue projecty circle, my rewards would be massively boosted because I'm closer to the stop. I don't know whether Niantic could implement something like that, whereby you can have the increased radius still active, so you can interact with gyms to do raids, and you can interact with stops to put lures down. But if you want to spin them and get items, you have them slightly reduced. You have the number of items reduced by 50% or something. I wouldn't have an issue with that, because in terms of using the stop and using the gyms, the functions are the same. You can still put a lure down, you can still do a raid, but the items that you get from spinning those photo discs of gyms and Pokéstops is reduced because you're not close enough. You can still access it, but you don't get the full potential. I don't see why that couldn't be implemented, to be honest. So I think that's one way that Niantic could actually change it effectively. They could say that that's a decent reason to make people maybe want to go closer to a stop, because you can get more items if you go closer to the stop. But if, for whatever, anxiety reasons, safety reasons, weather conditions, those multiple reasons I've already listed off, if you want to still access the stop or the gym to do a raid or put a lure down, you can do. Niantic, I should work for you. Frankly. I was sent something by Francesco, which actually was in the data mining, which is a very, very good point, is that Niantic have been working on a route planner feature for the longest time, and recently it was updated and upgraded in some way. The images and the assets were changed. It is possible that Niantic are putting this change in place because they want to implement the route maker, which means that you would have to plot a route, then you can share that route with your friends, players, etc. If that's the case, still begs the question as to why they do it though, because if you want to plan a route, surely it would be much easier to plan a route and give way more access to more people to plan a route if you have an increased stop capability. Let's go back to the whole thing of somebody who has mobility issues. They won't be able to utilise the route planning function as effectively as they could if Niantic reduce the stop radius. They'll implement a function that automatically alienates a lot of players because they can't utilise it to its full extent. Are Niantic trying to boost the number of times that people have to remote raid pass into raids by reducing the stop radius? I don't know. Like, it's just a theory at this point. It's probably a little bonus that they get on the side. It's like, oh, if you can't access or you can't be bothered to walk within those meters of that gym, haha, you can always use a remote raid pass and give us more money. Another thing, they actually mention it in the article, is that they're preparing for the return of the EX raids. Now, EX raids, my god, they've been out of the game for so long. Why are they reducing the radius because of EX raids, if that's what they're saying? Preparing for the eventual return of EX raids, surely having a bigger radius on a gym would mean that more people can access that EX raid without having to be so crowded together at one location. Blocking access for non-Pokemon Go players, you know, forcing people who don't want to interact to have to interact with each other. All of this sort of stuff. All of the points that I'd said before apply exactly to the EX raid coming back. Imagine if there's an EX raid at the shopping centre. I doubt that the shopping centre staff or the security will want a wave of 40 to 60 people jumping in and blocking all of the access because there's an EX raid there for half an hour. Surely allow us to access it from outside of the shopping centre so we can partake in our EX raid very easily. People can socially distance, people can not interact with each other, they can still do the raid together, and we don't inconvenience other people. We're going to finish off on 2 points here, which I think that Niantic really need to hear, is that the timing of this announcement couldn't have been a worse one if they even tried, because we've got the worst update, and I think there's an update that's just gone out last night which apparently fixes the seizure triggering flashing of the game, but it doesn't fix everything else in the game, which, okay, fine, they have to fix that issue itself. But the very fact that we've got this update where the quick catch is broken, the game is lagging horrifically. I've seen in the comments of posts on Twitter and my videos people saying the game is unplayable, really, it's horrific. We have to sit and watch the raid rewards chug along. People are displeased with this update, this news that's been dropped, and they've dropped it during possibly the worst 2 weeks of the game. I don't know, it's a bit like stepping in a mound of dog dirt and then immediately hitting your head on a sign. That's what Niantic have done. They've given us a double whammy of really bad, stupid news. Maybe wait until you'd fixed the game and change the updates and stuff. I know it would have meant that maybe we didn't get as much notice, but maybe you wouldn't have had so much hate and anger directed towards you because you're giving us something that we don't like during a time period where we were all really pissed off with the game. This is a point that I want to finish the video on, is that Niantic, you need to understand that you no longer have the AR, augmented reality, mobile gaming sector to yourself. Back when Pokemon Go was released, you did, But nowadays, you certainly do not. You have Jurassic World in there. I know there's a Walking Dead AR mobile game. Minecraft did have one, but it died as soon as it was released because it was poorly developed. There are other augmented reality mobile games. You don't have that sector to yourself. You have competition. And I don't know whether they don't understand that, because Jurassic World is it's always been a tad laggy. Always been a tad laggy whenever I've played it. But not once has the game crashed have I not been able to interact with things within the game. The basic game functions have worked all the time, whereas in Pokemon Go they really don't. It feels like every update they break something. There's something that's wrong. There's way less lag in the PvP system on Jurassic World than compared to Pokemon Go. They really need to understand that they need to up their game. They need to increase their productivity within the game of Pokemon Go and whatever other projects they're doing, and not move backwards, which is what they're doing with this update. They are bringing Pokemon Go backwards a step rather than projecting forwards. I don't know of any game that takes content out of a game unless it's actually breaking the game's function. But what Niantic are doing is they're breaking the game's function with updates anyway, and also removing content. Please understand, Niantic, that you have rivals within this gaming space, and you need to drive your game forwards to a better place. You can't afford to have bugs and issues with app updates like this. You need some quality testers. You need some testers. You need people in the company who actually play the game hardcore, who play it casually, who are PvPers. You need people to actually give you sensible feedback. Some of the feedback that's been given by us players is actually very, very sensible. It's been very, very good. I know the bigger content creators have certainly fed back directly to Niantic. I'm not in that privileged position, so I'm making this video. But however, the way that some people have reacted to this stuff is completely unacceptable. People have harassed actual personal accounts of employees at Niantic. You simply don't do that. You do not do that. So for goodness sake, do not target actual employees of Niantic, because it's not an individual who's put this together. It is a whole multitude of people through and through Niantic, from the low to the high, probably more the high end of the scale, I would assume, for something like this, who've pushed this news out at this specific time, chosen what is being included in the article, what is being removed from the game, what's being added, what's staying, etc. It's not one person's responsibility over this, so don't harass individual people over this article. It is not on. It's very easy to sit behind a keyboard and say horrible things to somebody. Don't do something you wouldn't do in reality over the keyboard. That's not on. It's just not on. For goodness sake, don't target individual people at Niantic. It is not fair on them, because they're not the sole responsibility of this. There is a way to put forward decent, sensible feedback through a sensible Twitter post, I don't know, a showcase of a screenshot of notes and stuff about why you think it's not so good. Make your voice heard, but make your voice heard to Niantic, not to individual employees. That's going to round out this video. I know that this may have been extortionately long, much longer than usual, but I don't think we've ever had to do this sort of thing in the past. I'd have usually written a sketch and done a 2 or 3 minute sketch, which I may still do, but this is a much more serious problem. I hope that the Niantic listen. I hope that Niantic listen, because people don't want this changed. They want it left as it is. It makes the game better for everybody, and removing it makes the game worse for a whole variety of different players in different ways, and it's going to remove some of the joy of this game. But of course, let me know in the comments if you agree, disagree, whatever. Do you resonate with some of these points in particular? Do you disagree with them at all? This is an open discussion. This is just me putting forward. I've tried to be a little bit more logical with this one. First time trying to actually be factual. But anyway, with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for watching, everybody. Please do make sure to subscribe if you are new with the notifications on, so you don't miss any uploads or live streams. And of course, smash that like button if you enjoyed the video. I do have to say, I understand that this is not a typical PoGoMiloUK video. I can understand if it's not been the most enjoyable experience, in which case I apologise. I just felt like I felt I had to make something about this. It's not an okay scenario we're in. Goodness me. And with that, I'll see you all tomorrow. Is the beginning of the Bidoof event, so Catch XP bonuses, Shiny Bidoof is released, so I'll be out 10 AM tomorrow, which is going to be good. But until then, take care everybody.